You learn to love the quiet when you work the night shift. It wraps around you like a worn blanket, familiar, a little musty, but comforting in its own eerie way. WKDL 103.7 wasn't a glamorous place, just a dusty little radio booth tucked on the edge of a dying town in upstate New York, its red on-air sign flickering like an old neon bar light. Most nights, I was alone from midnight until dawn, spinning late-night requests, reading news nobody listened to, and watching the seconds tick slower than molasses through the glass clock on the studio wall. But last night felt wrong the second I stepped through the door. The air was too still, not the sleepy background silence I was used to, but heavy, dead, as if the whole building had sucked in a breath and refused to let it go. Even the flickering hallway lights seemed quieter, their usual hum replaced with nothing. I blamed the coffee, too weak, and shook it off. At 12:02 a.m., I went live. "Good evening, night owls," I said into the mic, voice smooth, calm. "This is Casey, coming to you from the graveyard shift at WKDL. Let's keep the ghost company tonight, huh?" It was just a joke, one of those throwaway lines I said all the time. But last night, the second I said it, I swear the studio lights dimmed, just slightly, and the board crackled under my fingertips. I laughed it off, told myself it was feedback, static, an old station in an older building. This place had quirks. At 1:37 a.m., the phone rang. That was normal. We still had a working request line. It barely rang anymore. Maybe once a night, twice if the fog was heavy and truckers couldn't get a signal on their phones. But this ring, it didn't blink on the board. The light didn't light up, just the sound of the phone, buzzing like a fly against a window pane. Shrill, mechanical, relentless. I picked it up. WKDL. "Casey speaking. You're on the air." Dead silence. Not static, not a dropped call, just silence. Then a voice. Software fragile, like wind slipping through broken glass. "Casey?" I felt my spine straighten. "Yes. Who is this?" A pause. Then, "You're still alive." My mouth went dry. I leaned forward, heart thudding slow but hard. "Excuse me. You're still alive," the voice repeated, a little louder now. A woman's voice, hoarse, cracking at the edges, like it had been dragged out of a grave. "You shouldn't be." I slammed the line shut, my hand shaking. That wasn't a prank. I've worked nights long enough to spot those. This wasn't a kid with a voice modulator or a drunk messing around. That voice had weight to it. Grief, dust, time. I sat frozen, the air around me turning ice cold. I watched my breath fog for a moment. Then, as if the room remembered it was supposed to be warm, it stopped. The studio returned to normal. The board lights glowed steady again. I told myself I imagined it. At 2:10 a.m., the call came again. Same phone. Still no light on the board. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Who is this?" The voice sighed like old paper tearing. "I used to be here." "Used to be where?" "WKDL. I used to run the board. Before you. Before it all burned." "Burned?" I glanced around the studio. Nothing looked scorched. The walls were yellow with age, sure, but no fire damage, no soot, no char. "Look," I said, forcing a laugh. "You've got the wrong station." "No," she whispered. "You've got the wrong life." And then she hung up. I checked the logs. There were no incoming calls registered. Not on the request line, not on the internal line. Nothing. But the calls were real. I could still feel the cold from the handset against my cheek. I didn't take another request after that. Just let the playlist run on autopilot and tried to calm myself with coffee that tasted like rust. Around 3:15 a.m., I started to doze off at the board. That's when the lights cut out. Total black. No hum from the fluorescent bulbs, no glow from the monitor. Just the deep, suffocating blackness of a cave buried under the world. I stood up, heart hammering. Then I saw it. Outside the studio glass, standing in the hallway, was a figure. Faint, female. Head tilted just enough that her tangled hair obscured her face. Her dress was damp, tattered, heavy with soot and ash. She stood completely still, one hand pressed flat against the glass like she was trying to remember what it felt like to touch something living. I backed up, tripped over the mic cable, and fell. When I looked again, she was gone. The lights snapped back on. Everything was normal. Too normal. The playlist was still running. The board was still lit. Even the clock had resumed, ticking away like nothing had happened. Except the temperature in the room had dropped again, and this time it didn't rise. I was shivering. I thought about leaving, about grabbing my keys and getting in my car and driving until the sun came up. But something told me I couldn't. Not yet. I had to hear the third call. It came at 3:33 a.m. This time I didn't speak. I just answered. The voice was different. Male. Deeper. Familiar. Casey? Yeah. Do you remember the fire? I swallowed hard. What fire? He sighed. The one you started. My skin turned to ice. No, I've never started a fire. You were just a kid. You didn't mean to. But it spread. Fast. Through the booth. Through the studio. Through the dorms upstairs. That made no sense. This wasn't a school. We didn't have dorms. Not anymore. But something in my brain flickered, like a memory submerged too long underwater. I saw a door, a locked one, an old wooden panel near the back exit. I'd always thought it was a broom closet. I never opened it. You're lying, I whispered. No, you've just forgotten. We all did. Until you said it. Said what? There was a pause. Let's keep the ghosts company tonight. And then, the line exploded in static, violent, roaring white noise that filled the room like screaming wind. Every light blew at once. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The board smoked. The clock shattered, and over it all, I heard them. Whispers, hundreds of them, begging, blaming, crying. I dropped the phone, and the door, that door, slowly creaked open from the inside. I stumbled toward the back wall of the studio, where the old wooden door stood open like a mouth. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into blackness. I had never seen stairs there before. There shouldn't have been stairs, but I could feel something pulling at me, like gravity, but emotional. A weight behind my ribs that made me move even though my body screamed to run. I took one step down, then another. The air was thick, not dusty, wet, heavy with mold and the coppery sting of old blood. Each step creaked like a scream held in too long. The walls were tight, closing in as I descended, and I swear I could feel hands brushing against my shirt, my shoulders, my hair. At the bottom was a room, small, claustrophobic, a burnt-out studio with scorched walls, melted audio panels, and a shattered clock stuck at 3:33. There was no power, no sound, but there was a smell. Not just fire, not just death, remorse and guilt. So much guilt I felt like I was drowning in it. In the corner sat an old reel-to-reel recorder, still intact, humming softly. I walked over, my legs moving on their own, and pressed play. The tape whirred, then a voice filled the room. A child's voice, young, raspy, mine. I'm sorry, it said, barely above a whisper. I just wanted to hear her again. She said she'd call. I waited. I thought if I played her tape, maybe she'd come back. Another voice joined it. A woman's scream, sudden, raw, cut off by the unmistakable sound of flames. I froze. The memory hit like a truck. I was 8 years old. My sister, Lexi, had died the week before in a car accident. She loved this station. Our mom used to bring us here when she cleaned offices at night. Lexi would sneak into the booth and record fake shows with her high-pitched voice, playing pop songs and giggling through commercials. After the funeral, I snuck back in. I found one of her old tapes. I wanted to hear her voice again. I didn't mean to overload the system. I didn't know leaving candles around the board was dangerous. but something sparked. Something caught. They said it was faulty wiring. They lied to protect me. Lexi burned alive, and I forgot. No, I repressed it. I sank to my knees, sobbing, the cold biting through my clothes. The reel kept playing, now looping a quiet recording of Lexi singing "You Are My Sunshine." Off-key, sweet, heartbreaking, and then behind me, a soft voice. "Casey." I turned. Lexi stood there. Her dress was blackened, her hair singed, but her face was just as I remembered. Young, innocent, sad. "You never said goodbye," she said. "I didn't know," I whispered. "They told me it was an accident. I didn't remember. They all burned," she said. "Because of me, because of you. And now they're trapped." Behind her, shadows shifted. Figures stepped from the corners. Ash-covered bodies, melting faces, the smell of smoke thickening. A dozen, no more, crowding the space, whispering, eyes hollow, but watching. "What do I do?" I begged. "How do I fix this?" She tilted her head. "Let them speak." Then she vanished. The reel stopped. The walls of the studio began to tremble. Cracks split down the ceiling. The lights above sparked and flared. I turned and fled, up the stairs, into the hall. Only it wasn't the same station anymore. The walls were blackened. The floor was scorched. Ash rained from the ceiling like snow, and all the doors were open. Studio A, Studio B, archives. Every room pulsed with static and shadow. I heard voices on every frequency, crying, laughing, screaming, all playing at once. I ran to the main booth and saw the board, completely fried, melted into a pool of plastic. But the mic still glowed red. Broadcasted. Lexi's voice echoed in my head. "Let them speak." I sat, put on the headphones, pressed the on-air switch, and listened. The static cleared, and one by one, the voices of the dead poured through. A DJ who hung himself in Studio B after being blamed for the fire. A producer who tried to save Lexi and never made it out. Listeners who called in that night, trapped on the line as the flames spread. Each one told their story. Each one whispered their pain, and I let them. From 3:45 until dawn, the airwaves belonged to the dead. And when the sun finally rose, the static stopped. The studio returned to normal. The melted board was whole again. The soot was gone, but the phone rang. Once I answered. "Thank you," Lexi said, and the line went dead.